Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of It Follows. So why did I not review Furious 7? Well, because I want to see that with my dad, and he's not available until this coming Friday, and plus there's nothing being released that I really want to see, so I may as well just, kill two birds with one stone, save me some money. But then I realized that It Follows was playing, and I decided to go ahead and check that one out. And I'm really glad I did because this actually was one of the scarier films I've seen in quite some time. Now, I have to warn you, don't go into this film expecting it to be incredibly scary. Expect a good horror film, and then if it ends up leaving the same impression on you that it left on me, awesome. But I'd really hate to ruin it by hyping it up, far too much. Since fear is very subjective. But once I was done finishing it and I got home alone in my apartment at night, and I'm kind of frugal with the lights, so I try to keep them on as little as possible. Yeah, I started to get creeped out with all the freaking little noises I hear in the background. Um, but anyway, just a heads up to I haven't gotten my new microphone yet, so the audio is probably really bad, and I'll try to keep this review a little short just because I want to make sure my voice is as clear as possible. Um, so, where shall I begin? Well, let's talk about its scare tactics. And actually, before I even get into those, let me just bring up the general premise. So, the main girl, really nice girl, has sex with her new boyfriend, but unfortunately, he ruins the mood by revealing that um, he was being chased by this very mysterious demon. And the only way for him to get rid of it was to have sex with her, and now the demon's going to chase her, and the only way she can get rid of it is if she passes it on to somebody else through sex. Uh, Now, if she gets killed, the demon's just going to move back. It'll start hunting him again, and if he gets killed, it'll move on to the person who passed it on to him, and so on. The only people who can see it are those who were cursed, while even though it seems to take damage when you shoot it, uh, it'll just revive itself. It's super strong. It could take the form of anyone or anything, whether it's a loved one, stranger, or something that's not even human. And it moves at a brisk walk. It never runs, doesn't fly, doesn't drive. It just walks, but it never stops. No sleeping, no pee breaks, just relentlessly uh, goes wherever you are. So I thought this was a pretty cool premise. I'm tired of how all horror films tend to have the exact same uh, storyline, whereas this one actually does get really creative. It offers something relatively new. I mean, yeah, you could argue that it's taking a bit from The Ring, but it adds so much that I really only can make that comparison if I really think about it, and they're not really that alike. Uh, One thing I like about this movie too is it reveals just enough about the demon, but at the same time, it doesn't explain um, enough either. So there's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of mystery surrounding it, and to me, that was better because it just meant you weren't totally sure what to expect, and you could make your own theories. My presumption is that these rules are self-imposed, that it's doing this purely for sport, uh, and that if it really wanted to, it could just probably teleport towards you. The only reason I feel this way is it does break its own rules occasionally when confronted with a challenge that it can't overcome through walking. And so I liked that. I thought that was pretty interesting. Um, and it also, just a personal fan theory, it really wanted to screw with the main girl because she was so good natured and innocent. to the point where it actually seems to back off from her boyfriend. Apparently, it was just standing there watching him during the theater, uh, which it doesn't do throughout the rest of the movie. And I believe you see what appears to be it watching them during the dinner scene. So it's waiting for him to pass on this curse. And then um, just the way it looks at her later on, even though it's chasing somebody else by this point, um, whereas the demon ignored the boyfriend after he had passed it. Uh, you know, it just really wants to destroy this girl, and you like this character too, and that's always a good thing. You know, the best horror films are the ones where you do feel bad for the characters, where you don't want to see them to die. And I thought the character arc was really compelling because, you know, one of the cool ideas about this storyline is the impossible moral dilemma. You know, if she does nothing, you know, she's going to be on the run for the rest of her life. And if she gets killed, you know, she'll probably end up getting all of her predecessors killed as well. But at the same time, if she passes it along, she's also ruining lives, and you know, it will inevitably get other people killed in the process. It's a lose-lose situation, and you could tell, you know, the psychological trauma that's going on within her, and the actress just does a phenomenal job at conveying this. And because you feel bad for this character, you know, it just adds so much to the suspense because you do not want to see her to die or suffer. Uh, it Follows really relies a lot on the imagination, um, and once again, it really works for me. The opening scene, you know, has the first victim looking terrified at something. We don't see what she sees, but she's obviously really nervous. Um, and then it cuts to, you know, later on at night. She's isolated, alone. The lighting is very creepy and moody. They're using medium and wide shots just to, you know, totally remind us how isolated this character is. And you know, she has this, you know, tear-jerking conversation with her father over the phone, and then it cuts to the morning. She has already been killed. We do not see what happened, but we do see the aftermath, the state of her corpse. And it's pretty freaky because you're thinking, what in the hell could have possibly caused this? This is pretty fucked up. Well, later on, there is a strong implication as to what the demon actually does to you if it gets you. And holy shit, that just makes that opening scene, which was already really, really disturbing, that much more disturbing. Um, so, once again, just adding to the reasons that I was, you know, pretty freaked out while watching this movie. You know, it's just really powerful on a filmmaking level. I loved the camera work. I loved, once again, the use of medium and wide shots. One thing I thought was really compelling about this was how every scene is framed. And I don't know why this was the first movie I thought of when I noticed this, but The Pyramid, arguably the worst movie to come out in 2014. There's this one moment where these characters are having this conversation and the camera's kind of passing between them. And then there's this real awkward angle where you could see, you know, part of the background, and you're thinking the only reason they'd show this character from this perspective is because something is about to impale him from behind. And that's what happened. So the scene was telegraphed. This jump scare was ruined. Well, every scene in this movie is filmed as if something could come out and terrify you at any moment, but it often won't. And this just added to the unpredictability. It added, you know, increasing the feeling of unease because none of the scares were really telegraphed. In a way, it's like you know, watching. Well, like one of the things that left an impression on me in regards to Paranormal Activity, and don't look too deeply into this comparison, is how, you know, the shot is framed in a way to where you're never really sure what you're supposed to be paying attention to. Do you look at the bed where the characters are, or do you look towards the door where something could easily come in, or somewhere else, you know, floor, ceiling. You never know. And that's really good framing. Well, this film, you're always looking at the open door in the background with suspicion. You're always looking at the pathway that leads to the characters with suspicion, because the only reason you could think of why they show this in the background is if it's going to lead to some sort of scary moment. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That's a great way of building tension. Now, this is a very slow-paced film. You should be aware of that. There isn't a lot of action. Really, you could probably count the amount of really scary moments on one hand. I'd probably guess 5, maybe 6. And the rest is all just build up, and scenes seem to drag on for unnaturally long periods of time. Many people will get bored for this reason. That's why I have to warn you, don't get too hyped up for this movie. Expect a good film, not a great one. And if you end up thinking that it's great like I did, then good for you. But often I would get bored. I'm not a big fan of unreasonably slow paced movies. However, in this case, the methodically slow pace only added more to the scary sequences. They made the scary sequences that much bigger and more profound because it's building up to them. And when you take, I think, the most frightening moments in this movie and just watch them in themselves, like if they ever, compile all the high points into a YouTube video, I don't think they'll be as effective because it's the buildup that's leading to them. So that didn't bother me, and I'm usually the guy who can get really impatient really quickly with films that are slow burn but are like go beyond it. They're almost too slow. So that wasn't an issue for me at all. Geez, what else can I say? There are a few issues I took with the script, and I don't think this was a bad screenplay. Very ambitious. I thought it did a good job with the character writing. All the characters, they seem like normal people, but at the same time, they all have quirks. They're not just bland and generic youngsters. They all have, aspects of their personalities that stand out. But at the same time, they don't define them either. And I thought the actors did a really good job at conveying fear, something that's really underappreciated within the horror genre, as well as you can just tell that this psychological trauma was weighing down on them, but they never lose the key aspects that make these characters interesting. When it comes to the depth of this film, almost everybody is going to point to the symbolism. But to me, it's just too on the nose to really deserve that level of praise. When you see a vampire naked chick with blood pouring out of her vagina, it doesn't take that much mental ability to figure out what that is supposed to mean. It's just a bit too obvious. The whole film could be argued as some sort of metaphor for an STD. It is a metaphor for STD. There's really no debate about that. But I'm not criticizing the movie for doing this, because even like the over-the-top symbolic imagery is still pretty freaky in itself. However, I am criticizing the critics who really get hung up on that kind of stuff, just because it's too obvious. Everybody is going to notice it. However, the depth that I really appreciated was the random shots of just nature. And the reason why I felt this way, even though you could arguably dismiss it all as gratuitous, art house-esque padding, is it was all from the point of view of the main girl. And I'm going to kind of cut back a little bit. There's this conversation early on where the main girl and her boyfriend, they're playing this game where they have to pick somebody in the crowd around them, and they pick the person whom they'd want to switch their lives with. So she immediately presumes that he'd switch places with this good-looking guy who's making out with this really hot chick, and he says no. And it turns out the person he would switch places with is the little kid because his entire life is in front of him. And it's at first a heartwarming moment until you learn later on why he feels that way, that his days are likely numbered, and even if he does live a long life, he's always going to be looking over his shoulder. So you get the impression that he probably took his life for granted before this happened, and now he kind of appreciates it, but unfortunately, you know, it might not last too long, so it's just kind of late to really appreciate it. However, with the girl, she doesn't seem to take life for granted at all. You know, when you first see her, she's noticing all the plant life, the insects, the animals. You know, once again, this all seems like very fillery stuff that's intended to be good looking for the sake of being good looking. But however, it just to me is saying volumes about this character. And throughout the rest of the movie, you know, after she gets cursed, you can still tell that, you know, she's paying attention to pretty much, you know, all the beauty of the world, the trees, the ocean, and so on, except there's something a little bit bleaker about it. And that just makes her character arc that much more tragic, and that just makes me feel bad for her that much more. So I thought that was really well done. If I did take an issue with the screenplay, it's that I felt I didn't understand one character's plan towards the end. Like, a lot of people are going to talk about, you know, how the film concludes itself, you know, right before the end credits begin. I was fine with that. I actually thought that was pretty genius, and that it's frustrating, and you heard like a lot of audible groans once it happens. But to me, the film knew the reaction it was going to get, and that was just it fit really well within the rest of the movie. However, the finale, where they try to have their final confrontation with this demon, they just introduce like all this stuff. I was wondering, why do they think this would work? Is there something about demonology that I'm forgetting? Did they reveal some piece of information that I overlooked? I don't think so, but otherwise it just kind of feels like an ass pull, and I don't know why the characters would put so much stock into this. It seems like the real logical thing to do is go, you know, to another country like Japan, or just you know, separate an ocean between you and this demon and see if it can get, you know, across there on its own. Now, I have to presume that since I believe these rules are self-enforced, that the demon probably just would be like, ha, nice try, and would teleport over to the next continent. But that would be something that they should have at least acknowledged. But still, you know, I really liked the ambiguity of everything. You know, even scenes that people criticized, like the boat sequence. You know, to me, the only reason it was there was to, you know, leave you wondering, did this character do something potentially terrible? And the film doesn't really give you any answers. It just leaves it to your imagination, like the rest of the movie. But still, you know, the slow pace is very alienating. Some people are going to be distracted by the time period. You see some modern day stuff, like I noticed someone was using a cell phone. Somebody appeared to be using some sort of, I don't know what it is, but it's like some sort of iPad or Kindle type device relatively early on. Yet at the same time, they all have those big boxy TVs. And there's a lot of attention drawn to those old-fashioned TVs. So I have no clue when this movie was supposed to take place in, and it didn't bother me, but I can see it bothering some people. The adults don't seem to be very prevalent. Like, where are the parents, or at least the mother, because I believe it said the father had died. Or, you know, the cops don't really seem to be thoroughly investigating anything. But I believe the film is making a point there. Since, you know, the film is based around teenagers, or at least relatively young people, and it seems like through their eyes the older generation is kind of useless. So I really liked this movie. Definitely go check it out. If you want to read my written review, I'll provide the link in the description. Also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Once again, though, keep expectations mild, expect a good movie, but definitely go out of your way to see It Follows, primarily if you are a horror fan. I will be pissed off if Annabelle makes a shit ton of money despite being a total piece of shit, and It Follows, underwhelms at the box office. That would make me very sad. I've also done written reviews of, the first 7 Puppet Master movies now. I believe the last one I had posted was Puppet Master: The Legacy. I did just get done watching all the Puppet Master movies, so at least I won't have to sit through one of those again for a while. No more shitty sequels, thank God. And I also reviewed Demonic Toys in order to set up my upcoming review for Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys. So please read all of those. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.